So I will be the very first person to admit that I absolutely had Trump Derangement Syndrome for a good 2 to 3 years. I absolutely had it. You know, I didn't think it was a real thing at the time, and you say, oh, that's just a right-wing fantasy. That doesn't really exist. Whatever. It is absolutely a real thing, and it skews the way you view absolutely everything when it comes to Donald Trump. So what I wanted to do in this video was to just talk about how I experienced Trump Derangement Syndrome and then offer some advice for things that you can do to gently change the minds of your friends, your family, your loved ones, the people in your lives that may be suffering from it as well. And listen, I'm not talking about changing their vote. This should not be about convincing them to vote a certain way. I know that's like a stinging thing to hear, right? If you're going to go through all this effort to change their mind, you want them to vote for your guy, for Donald Trump. But I mean, and I'm assuming a lot of you watching are voting for Trump or Trump supporters or things like that. If you're not, hey, welcome, this might help you too. But the thing of it is it shouldn't be about convincing people who to vote for. It should be about helping them to see the situation much more clearly. How I've described it when I kind of came out of my Trump derangement syndrome was it was like a fog had been lifted from my eyes. I called it waking up. Many of you have said, Carlin, you're awake now. Fantastic. And, you know, that's exactly what it was like. It was like all of a sudden I saw the world completely differently. And it still shocks me today how differently I perceive Donald Trump and the job he's doing compared to maybe even just like 6 months ago or a year ago. I mean, we're talking about night and day here. And now that's not to say that I like everything that he does, because I don't like everything he does, and I will still take him to task for doing just some of the nonsense that's really unnecessary. But, you know, generally speaking, it has completely changed the way I view the guy. So what we're going to do with this is I wanted to start off by looking at a specific section in the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, because first of all, this is a fantastic book. If you have not read this book, go buy this book. It is fantastic. Kind of scary, to be honest, about, you know, what's going on at colleges and universities and how that's impacting culture and the indoctrination that's going on and all like the crazy cancel culture, safe space stuff. Insane. But one of the things that they talk about in this book is some of the most common cognitive distortions that take place from a cognitive behavioral therapy perspective. And cognitive distortions are essentially when we don't see things the way they really are. And in order to solve it, you have to disrupt the thought process. You have to stop it in its tracks and get people to look at things differently. So what I thought we could do is just go through the list, and I could talk about how that manifested in my Trump derangement syndrome. And then we're going to look at some things that you should consider when trying to change people's minds. So, number one cognitive distortion from the coddling of the American mind: emotional reasoning, letting your feelings guide your interpretation of reality. I feel depressed, therefore my marriage is not working out. So I actually talk about this specific cognitive distortion quite a bit when it comes to the workplace. And how I frame it in the workplace is, think about like that vice president or your president or your CEO, and you know, you really dislike this person. You do not like this particular leader. They bother you, they annoy you, they make you angry. Now, imagine that person comes up with a plan or an initiative, and this is like a big time initiative in your organization. This is going to have a lot of impact, and it could potentially do a lot of good. And let's just posit that this person has done their homework, they've really thought it through, they're ready to go. They have put together the best plan in the history of plans. This plan has been vetted, it has been thought through, there has been no stone unturned in the creation of this plan. Because you don't like that person, because they get your goat, they make you mad, nothing they can do is good enough, you are going to find reasons to dislike this plan. That's what we're talking about here, because people just emotionally, viscerally don't like Donald Trump, have a visceral negative reaction to those red hats, think everything he says is racist and bad. They're going to see anything that he tries to do as being the absolute worst, most ill-conceived, worst plan in the history of plans. And that was definitely true with me. Donald Trump could do no right in my eyes. And we're seeing that show up a lot in the coronavirus stuff as well. It's like there is literally nothing the man can do to make some people happy, especially the media. Number two, catastrophizing. focusing on the worst possible outcome and seeing it as the most likely. So in this case, how this manifested for me is anything Trump wanted to do, anything he tried, I was like, well, this is going to be terrible. This is going to be the worst thing that's ever happened. This is an emergency. He's going to hurt lots of people. It's going to cause lots of chaos. Again, nothing the guy could do would be right. Think about it. I think a good example in this case is thinking about, the rumors that there were going to be all these concentration camps for gay people and, that they were just going to be rounded up and that's looking at catastrophizing the situation. It's blowing it up to a really absurd degree. And of course, those catastrophes never really manifest. I mean, maybe another example of this is like Rachel Maddow on MSNBC every night talking about Russia, 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 Russia. Like, oh my God, I totally bought into that. I really did, because listen, I actually like watching Rachel Maddow from a presentation perspective. I'm a bit of like a presentation snob, and so I learn a lot from watching people on the news about how to present and how to be engaging. And so I watched Rachel Maddow a lot because I liked the way she talked about things and presented information. And of course, as I'm doing this, all this Russia information infiltrates its way into my brain, and I'm like, yeah, Russia, all this, and it was crazy. Like, none of that was true. It was like nuts. I mean, maybe they're like nuggets of truth in there, and then they just get blown way out of proportion. And that probably leads to number 3, overgeneralizing, perceiving a global pattern of negatives based on a single incident. This generally happens to me a lot. This generally happens to me. I seem to fail at a lot of things. And yeah, I mean, I think like there was a lot of overgeneralization in regards to like, even if Trump did something right, here's how this worked for me, I think. Even if Trump did something right, I would go back to a previous wrong and say, well, you did this, therefore every other thing is bad because you did this one thing 3 weeks ago, and now, that has to cloud how I'm seeing everything you're doing now. Listen, we're seeing this with coronavirus too. This is actually, coronavirus is maybe bringing out the Trump derangement part of us, right? Because listen, like, where are the media focused? Well, Trump, you didn't do this back in January. You didn't do this back in January. They're not focusing on what he's doing now. They're taking incidents from before and making it seem as though that is the absolute end-all be-all of what he's doing when it's just not. Dichotomous thinking, also known variously as black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, and binary thinking. Viewing events or people in all or nothing terms, I get rejected by everyone, or it was a complete waste of time. And yeah, we can definitely see this show up too. Again, this is like, everything Trump does is bad. Everything is bad. The man does no good. I mean, oh my gosh. Some people in my life now, like, I watch this happen on Facebook, and I have to bite my tongue sometimes because I can't always be like telling them, this is a good thing that Trump did and this is a thing that you'd really like, because they're like, no, Carlin, everything is bad. Trump has never done anything good. He's never contributed anything good to the country. I don't know that I ever really was that bad, to be honest, because, listen, I didn't mind Neil Gorsuch, actually, when he got nominated. I didn't understand why everyone was so upset about Neil Gorsuch. I was like, he's a conservative judge, but he seems pretty competent and capable and smart, and, he's definitely qualified for a seat on the Supreme Court. Like, I don't think was that bad, but a lot of people are. Mind reading, assuming that you know what people think without having sufficient evidence of their thoughts. He thinks I'm a loser. So this, oh my gosh, Trump is racist is a good version of this. Like, he hates black and brown people. Like, he thinks they all come from S-hole countries and they're all rapists and murderers. And listen, Trump is not the best communicator in the world. And he says some things that I don't agree with. And he is of a certain generation where, frankly, and I know you guys don't like that I say this, but frankly, I do think that there is unconscious bias there. Now, does that mean that I think that Trump treats all black people or Latino people or, any women or anything else in the same way? No, I don't. I think that he's much more of an individualist. But, I think that it's very easy for a lot of people to assume, like, Trump says something because he's racist and that's what he thinks. He's a racist. I definitely did that. I absolutely thought Especially with the biggest thing for me, I was so angry when he said something about the squad. It was like, I think he told them to like go back to their countries or something, or go back to where you came from. And, you know, one of them, Ilhan Omar, is like, you know, not from here. He's an immigrant. So I was like, racist. He's racist. And I definitely did. I was very angry about that. I definitely thought it was racist. I posted on all my social media. I was like, if you support this man, you need to unfriend me now. I absolutely did that. I have oh my gosh, I am legitimately like embarrassed and have a lot of shame for some of the things that have come out of my mouth or have been typed by my fingers in the past couple of years. I really am, but I have to own it. I'm going to be vulnerable and say guilty. Labeling, assigning global negative traits to yourself or others, often in service of dichotomous thinking, I'm undesirable, or he's a rotten person. I mean, I think this is kind of the same thing, you know, saying, you know, Trump is a bad person, and there's just nothing he can do that's good. I think that's kind of the same thing. Negative filtering. You focus almost exclusively on the negatives and seldom notice the positives. Look at all the people who don't like me. And I mean, again, with Trump, yes. This is a key attribute of Trump Derangement Syndrome, is only paying attention to the negative things. Listen, people are human beings. People mess up. Every single person makes mistakes. Every single president makes mistakes. Every single leader makes mistakes. But all that's ever reported in the media is, or like in some media, here are the bad things that Trump is doing. And so, yeah, that was all that I saw because I was watching a lot of MSNBC. That was almost exclusively where I got my news. Discounting positives, claiming that the positive things you or others do are trivial. It's been a long day. You guys know what word I mean. So that you can maintain a negative judgment. That's what wives are supposed to do, so it doesn't count when she's nice to me, or those successes were easy and so they don't matter. And yeah, I mean, obviously, because a lot of people with Trump are definitely doing this negative filtering thing, so they're completely discounting the positive things he's doing. Like, and again, we see this with coronavirus, right? Trump is getting zero credit for what has been done on this and the progress that he's made on this and on the leadership that he's shown on this. Absolutely zero credit for this. And he has done all of those things. I think the most overt example of it that I can think of is the fact that Trump hasn't been given any credit for, you know, closing the borders with China, obviously, but also in starting that task force during impeachment. I mean, that's pretty incredible if you think about it. The fact that Trump was focused on what was going on, he was taking in this information, he started the task force, he put Mike Pence in charge of it. That was exactly what he should have done, and kudos to him for doing it. And that's, of course, not being talked about at all. And of course, I did this too. Again, in my eyes, Trump could do no right. Blaming, focusing on the other person as the source of your negative feelings. Oh, buddy. You refuse to take responsibility for changing yourself. She's to blame for the way I feel, or my parents caused all my problems. And yes, people do this all the time with Trump. He is responsible for, I mean, my gosh, this is why the term snowflake exists, isn't it? Because everyone blames Trump for every negative feeling that they have. Now, the way that I was handling this, and this is the honest truth, is I found Trump to be more of an amusement than anything else. And my perspective on it was like, well, I have to find a way to laugh in this situation, otherwise I'm going to cry. And so for me, I don't know that I ever really engaged in as much of the blaming stuff as other people have, because I was really trying to find humor in it more than anything else, because I believe almost anything can be funny. And Trump's a funny dude. And I remember feeling really bad for Trump that no one got his jokes, or the media didn't get his jokes, because he is I always thought he was funny, even when I didn't like him very much. All right, so those are some of the most common cognitive distortions, and I think we can see that there is a lot of overlap here between many of those distortions. So we have to know what we're fighting. We have to know the monster we're fighting. This is what you're fighting when you're fighting Trump Derangement Syndrome, is these different types of distortions where it's just all or nothing. Trump is the worst thing. He is basically Hitler incarnate. He is the worst thing that has ever happened ever in the history of the world. Of course, it's not true, but that's where we're starting off from. Listen, when I first started listening to conservative voices, part of the reason was I wanted to understand their perspective. if you want to change people's minds, you have to understand their perspective first. Because when I started listening to conservative voices, it wasn't because I was thinking about leaving the Democratic Party. It was because I wanted us to win the election. And I was like, we need to understand what we're fighting in order to win the election. Now, of course, in the process, I've ended up completely flipping. Well, not completely. I haven't abandoned a lot of my liberal views. I feel like I've still retained my values, but have definitely flipped in my perception of Trump, that's for sure. So what I thought we would do next is look at some ways, some strategies that you can use to try to change people's minds. So I have this article from Psychology Today. It was about a little less than a year and a half ago, but still these things, they don't need to be, as timely for them to still be applicable. This is not news. This is just tactic. And I think this one has some really good points. Proven ways to change someone's mind. Research shows us the elements of persuasive dialogue. And this was right before the 2018 election, so I think that's why they were covering this topic. Americans will head to the polls tomorrow, again, 2018, while the year is proving to be one of the most politically divisive in U.S. history. Here at Evidence-Based Learning, we still hold on to the hope that Americans can engage in a civil dialogue. I hold on to that hope too. I want Americans to engage in a civil dialogue. Please, God, I want that. Oh my word. So we thought this would be a great time to re-examine the evidence on changing someone's mind. It turns out changing someone's mind is a very difficult thing to do. There are a variety of psychological theories that explain why. For starters, people are programmed to seek out viewpoints that are similar to their own or that confirm what they already believe. A prime example is research showing that people are more likely to tune into a news channel that aligns with their political beliefs. Why I was watching MSNBC absolutely all the time, right? So for starters, I just want to point out that, the very first thing this article points out, right, is that changing someone's mind is really, really difficult to do. We should probably even highlight that one in some purple. So why I want to point this out to you is that, listen, this takes time. People think, I've seen, gosh, probably thousands of comments. You're like, you red pilled faster than anyone in history. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I was at this for months, folks. For months and months and months and months and months. This was a very, very slow burn. You just didn't see that because all of a sudden one day I popped into your awareness because of my article or one of these videos or a tweet or whatever the heck. But it didn't happen like that. It was a very slow burn that happened over the course of many, many months. Be prepared if you're trying to change people's minds. Hey, listen, November's coming up, man. If you want to change someone's mind, you better start right now. Start today. Everyone's stuck at home. What else are you going to do, right? So it does take a while. In addition, the human brain tends to interpret and recall information in a way that confirms people's existing beliefs, while it spends less time considering other people's points of view. I was making proactive steps to understand the point of view of conservatives. That was part of why my mind was open to being changed. But the people that are your friends, your family members, their mind might not be as open, right? Because they haven't taken those proactive steps than I do. That's not to say you can't do it, but it is a very, very different context to operate in. The bottom line is changing someone's mind is a difficult task, but it's not impossible. In 2016, researchers at Cornell University published a study examining the best strategies for changing someone's mind in an online forum. To gather data, the researchers analyzed online conversations in a forum called Change My View within Reddit. In the forum, participants post their beliefs and invite others to try to change their minds. Now, they make a really important point here. It's important to note that people in the study are inviting others to try to change their points of view, which is easier than trying to persuade someone who is not open to new ideas, which is what I just talked about and why this sometimes takes so long. When an original poster has been persuaded to a different point of view, they post the delta symbol, the Greek character used to denote change, and explain why they changed their minds. By analyzing the forum, researchers found specific attributes that made it more likely original posters would change their minds. Participants who used different words compared to the original poster, a sign of introducing a new point of view, were most likely to change someone's mind. Arguments using specific examples were also more likely to change someone's mind. I really think the specific examples thing is absolutely critical. Listen, on the left, and this is just, I'm about to make an overgeneralization, but they don't use specific examples. What they do is they say Trump's racist, he's misogynist, he's a homophobe, he is Hitler. They don't use specific examples. And that was definitely one of the things that helped me when I was talking to conservatives, was they used very specific examples of like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Did you consider this? Did you know that? They were able to form these arguments. You all have those specific examples in your back pocket. Don't let this descend into an argument or a shouting match. You have to just be very calm about it and say, did you know this? Did you know XYZ? Or and try to use sources that they trust. Try to use sources that they believe are reliable, because if you put something from Fox News, they're going to say, oh, it's from Fox News, not a valid source because they're biased. And of course, like, just because it's Fox News doesn't mean it couldn't be very accurate information, but that's going to be instantly, they're going to turn you off. They're going to be they would rather look for things that confirm what they already think, right? So try to use sources that align with their current worldview. Researchers found word choice to be an important factor. People who posted an original opinion using the word I, signaling a personal belief, were more likely to change the minds compared to people who used the word we in their post, which signaled a broader perspective. People who responded by qualifying their arguments using words such as it may be the case, were more persuasive than those who used staunch opinions. This is very important because this is a mistake a lot of you make. You say, this is the way it is and there is no other way to look at it. Well, folks, there's always more than one way to look at things. I mean, I've experienced this with a lot of you, to be frank, where you're like, you're stupid because you didn't know this. And you actually use the word stupid too, which you shouldn't do, or call people idiots, or call people names. That's not going to change anyone's mind. And a lot of y'all, and I know you're going to argue, Carlin, we would never call you insults or derogatory terms. Those are secret leftists. No, they're not. No, they're not. No, they're not. Come on. Admit, it's okay, man. It's just you and me. We're just having a conversation here. No, they're not secret leftists. I've been insulted by an awful lot of Trump supporters, conservatives, Republicans, whatever. And I don't hold any bad feelings for a lot of this stuff. But just know that if the mission is to change someone's mind, insulting them ain't gonna do it. And it's also probably not gonna work because, going back to this idea of staunch opinions, like stating something as though it's fact. Instead, what you want to do is, here's a term I want you to remember. What resists persists. The minute you fight something, the minute you try to push against something, the minute you say, this is the way it is, it's the way it's always been, it's the way it's gonna be, you're resisting. What you need to do and what they're suggesting here is taking a little bit more of a relaxed approach. Like, I see the world like this, or, maybe it could be this way, or maybe it could be that way, or some people see it from this perspective, some people see it from that perspective. When you're doing that, you're finding a way to flow with the person that you're talking to. You're not, I'm about to say the most Zen thing ever in the history of the world. Be like water. Be like water. Does water flow uphill aggressively? No. Water flows downhill, finding every crack and crevice along the way. Be like water, folks. It's going to help you. The number of replies within each thread also signaled the likelihood the original poster would change their view. Some back and forth, up to 4 times, yielded positive results. But after 5 replies, posters were significantly less likely to change their minds. So what this is telling you is that there's a balance here. Right? There should be a little bit of back and forth, but once you cross the line into too much back and forth, then you're probably just getting into an argument, and then people are going to be digging their heels in. They probably aren't going to change their minds. But what about the world beyond internet forums? What about trying to change Uncle George's mind at a family dinner this weekend? And by the way, I do not think these conversations should be happening on the internet. The internet is way too easy to dehumanize people. Have these conversations in person or over video if you can. I mean, I know that's hard in the situation we're in right now. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not doable. And just because it's hard right now doesn't mean it'll be hard forever. So try to talk in person if you can. Because It turns out there's a personal aspect in persuasion as well. The concept of self-affirmation, that people need to feel a personal sense of identity and worth, is an important factor in persuading someone. Research shows that by challenging Uncle George's political beliefs, you're questioning his personal judgment. But if you say something nice first, either pay Uncle George a compliment or point out one part of his views that you agree with, he'll be more likely to consider your perspective. The bottom line, it's difficult, but not impossible to change someone's mind. So what they said in this last one is really important. Try to find common ground. Try to look for things that you can agree on. Like, can we agree on this? Or, it doesn't need to be the whole thing. And the last thing I want to say on this, don't try to convince people to like Trump. Don't start there. Let that evolve naturally over time. Talk about policy. Talk about different things that are going on in the world. Don't talk about Trump directly. Trump is way too divisive right now, folks. You cannot change, or rather, I'm gonna modify that. It is very difficult to change someone to come around to liking Donald Trump when he's as a human being, when he's people have a visceral negative reaction to the man. Okay, that's not logical, right? So trying to logic your way into that isn't going to happen. But if you talk about bigger concept, if you talk about values, you know what it was really for me? It was the values argument. It was being reminded, because I don't know how this happened, but I forgot for a couple of years how important freedom of speech was for me. I literally forgot. I was focused on other things. I was building a business. I was writing a book. I was serving clients. I was traveling a lot for work. I forgot what my core values were. And I needed people to come along and remind me, like, this is really important. And this is why it's important. So what really ended up changing my mind ultimately was not conversations around Trump this and Trump that and Trump the other. My opinions around Trump changed later. It was the conversations around values first. So maybe you start there. Start with the things you can agree on. Start with the things that are important. Listen, no matter what indoctrination has happened at colleges for a lot of people, there is still, I need to believe, I want to believe, there is still something about being raised in this like cowboy American culture where people do value freedom and all of the things that come with it. And I think if you can appeal to those values, that's what could make you successful in changing people's minds and helping them get over their Trump derangement syndrome.